Rhea Calder stood in the dusty courtyard of the Red Horizon colony, her wrists locked in a magnetic restraint pole. The afternoon sun was harsh, turning the red dirt ground into a shimmering sheet of heat. People from the small settlement gathered around her, watching silently. No one dared to speak. No one dared to defend her. The corporate security officers had arrived in armored suits, and everyone knew that standing up to them usually ended badly. Rhea tried her best to stand tall, but she was trembling. She had only wanted to fix the mining software, to update the system that kept shutting down and costing the colony credits every day. But when she accessed the code, she had found something she was never supposed to see: deep logs showing that the corporation was stealing output totals and hiding production losses. It meant the colony was being robbed. It meant the extra work, the reduced rations, the constant pressure on miners. All of it was a lie. She made the mistake of reporting it. The next morning they arrested her. Now she stood in the open courtyard as the lead security officer paced in front of her. He was a tall man, with a cold face and eyes that managed to look bored even during moments like this. He carried a standard-issue energy baton, powered down but ready. His voice was smooth, practiced, and meant to sound like justice. "Rhea Calder," he said, "you are found guilty of conspiracy, sabotage, and inciting doubt in the colony. Your punishment will remind others what happens when order is challenged." Rhea's heart pounded, her mouth dry. She wanted to shout that she was innocent. She wanted to scream that the corporation was lying. But the crowd would not help her. They were afraid. And she could not blame them. The officer lifted the baton. The magnetic lock hummed as it prepared to tighten when a slow whistle drifted across the courtyard. Everyone turned. A man leaned against a post on the edge of the square. He wore a dusty coat, the style old-fashioned, something like a cowboy from frontier holos. His boots were scuffed, his hat wide-brimmed, and a small device hung at his hip that did not look like any colony legal tool. He had arrived silently, as if the world had not noticed him until this moment. The officer frowned. "This is a corporate matter. Leave now." The stranger did not move. His voice carried calmly across the silent courtyard. "I think you're making a mistake. That girl hasn't done anything wrong." There were gasps from some of the settlers. The officer straightened to full height, baton still in hand. "Identify yourself." The stranger finally stepped forward. The crowd moved away from him without thinking. There was something in the way he walked, unhurried, confident, as if he feared nothing here. He stopped only a few meters away from Rhea. "Name's Jackson Ward," he said, "and I suggest you release her." The officer laughed once, short and sharp. Jackson replied in a voice that was completely calm. "Then you'll force me to get involved," said. Something in his tone made even the most hardened settlers stiffen. The officer, however, smirked and signaled 2 armored guards to detain Jackson. They moved fast, their heavy boots hitting the dirt with mechanical rhythm. But Jackson was faster. In one smooth motion he stepped aside, tapped his wrist, and a shimmering field flashed for half a second. The guards' suits deactivated, as if every circuit inside them had shut down at the same moment. They stiffened, frozen in their own armor, unable to move. A wave of whispers swept across the courtyard. Rhea stared at the stranger, shocked. That technology was far beyond what colonists had access to. It wasn't corporate standard either. It was alien or something just as advanced. The officer took 2 steps back, panic flickering in his eyes. "What did you do?" Jackson did not draw a weapon. He did not move in a threatening way. He simply looked at the officer, as if discussing a quiet trade deal. "I disabled their suits. No one is hurt. I don't want violence. I only want you to free the girl." The officer hesitated. It was clear he wanted to refuse. But the crowd was watching, and fear had started to shift. Some settlers looked hopeful, for the first time in months. If the officer ordered another attack and Jackson stopped that too, things could turn ugly for the corporation's authority. Grinding his teeth, the officer stepped forward and tapped his panel. The magnetic restraints on Ria's pole clicked and powered down. Her arms dropped free, aching from the strain. She rubbed her wrists and stumbled a little, but Jackson steadied her with a hand on her arm. "Come with me," he said gently. Ria looked up at him with wide eyes. "Who are you?" "Someone who hates bullies," he answered. The officer shouted after him. "If you think you can walk away, you're wrong. We'll report this. We'll come for both of you." Jackson only tipped his hat slightly. "I'm counting on it." He guided Ria away from the courtyard. The settlers parted silently, watching them go. The crowd did not cheer. They did not speak. But they watched with something new in their eyes, something like the first spark of hope. As they left the settlement and walked toward the open wilderness stretching beyond the colony perimeter, Ria could finally breathe again. Her pulse was still racing, her legs still weak, but she was alive. Alive and free. She looked at the stranger again. "Why did you help me?" Jackson kept walking without breaking stride. "Because you were telling the truth, and nobody should be punished for that." They walked further, past the rusted mining tracks, past the outskirts where dry alien grass grew in small clusters. The sky deepened into a darker red as the twin suns began their slow descent. The planet's wind picked up, brushing dust past their boots. Ria studied the device at his hip. "That tech you used, I've never seen anything like it." Jackson paused, then looked off toward the horizon. "You've seen a lot less than most people out there. The corporations keep colonies like this, small, isolated, afraid. Makes them easy to control. So, the stories are true," she whispered. "Other colonies, other governments, other civilizations. There's a whole galaxy out there," Jackson said, starting forward again. "And some big players don't like what the corporations are doing on the frontier." Ria followed him, unsure what to believe. But she had no choice. If she had stayed, she would have been punished for something she did not do. This stranger had saved her life. And now, she could only trust him. As the settlement disappeared behind them, and the mountains came into view, Ria realized something important. She wasn't just escaping. She was crossing into a world much larger than she had ever imagined. And whatever happened next, she would never be the same. The air on Red Horizon was thin and dry, and the red mountains in the distance looked almost painted, as if the whole world was slowly turning to rust. Ria's legs still ached from being restrained in the courtyard for so long. But she pushed forward because she had no other choice. Returning to the settlement was impossible now. She was a wanted criminal in the corporation's eyes, and the punishment next time would not stop with a public display. Jackson didn't look tired at all. His steps were steady, and his coat flapped lightly in the wind. From time to time, he would glance around the horizon, as if checking for danger. Ria noticed that he didn't use any tracking device, wrist scanner, or settlement locator like most colony travelers. He seemed to know the land by memory. It surprised her, considering he looked like someone who carried more technology in his pocket than the entire colony. "You walk like someone who's lived here for years," she finally said. Jackson smiled slightly. "I've lived on many worlds. After a while, you learn how to move quietly." Ria did not know what that meant, but she did not have the energy to question it. The sun was halfway set when they reached a steep path, climbing into the foothills. Jackson stopped beside what looked like a large rock face. At first, Ria didn't see anything special, but Jackson touched the stone with his palm. A tiny blue light blinked, the surface shimmered like a reflection breaking on water, and a doorway appeared where solid stone had been moments before. Ria stared with open shock. This is a cloaking field." "A simple one," Jackson said, stepping through. "The galaxy has bigger ideas of hiding things." She followed him inside, and the field resealed behind them, making the entrance disappear completely. Inside, A narrow tunnel led downward. Soft lights powered on automatically as they walked. Instead of rough cave walls, the place was covered in smooth metallic plating, edges tight and seamless. Rhea touched one wall, amazed. "This is not colony construction," she whispered. "No," Jackson said. "I built it myself." The tunnel opened into a large room. Rhea expected a futuristic base, but instead she found something very different. The main space looked like a cozy old cabin, wooden furniture, hand-sewn cushions, a small heater that looked like a rustic fire stove. On one wall hung a canvas painting of a quiet valley. A kettle sat on a counter. Yet mixed among the warm touches were advanced scanners, a sleek table with a holographic map, and screens with alien symbols idle on standby. Rhea didn't know where to look first. "This isn't what I imagined." Jackson placed his hat on a hook and walked toward the kitchen area. Most frontier places forget that a home should feel like a home. I got tired of metal walls. She stood still, overwhelmed. After a moment, Jackson handed her a cup of warm, herbal drink. Rhea took it slowly and sat in one of the cushioned chairs. The simple warmth of the cup in her hands made her think of home, her real home, back on one of the inner worlds before her family moved to the colony. It felt like a different lifetime. "You can stay here safely," Jackson said as he sat across from her. "My systems will alert me long before anyone approaches." Rhea took a sip of the tea. It tasted floral, calming. She finally felt the weight of the day hitting her: fear, humiliation, shock at nearly being punished, and confusion about this stranger who had saved her. "Why do you live out here alone?" she asked quietly. Jackson leaned back in his chair, the light from a soft ceiling panel catching the side of his face. "Because someone has to watch what the corporations are doing on the frontier. And it's easier to stay hidden when you're off the grid." Rhea wasn't sure she understood. "But you talk like you know more than most settlers. Like you know what's happening beyond this world." Jackson looked at her for a long moment before responding. "I do." He stood and walked to the wall where the holographic map was mounted. He tapped a control panel, and the map activated, projecting a three-dimensional star chart above the table. Dozens of small lights burned in the air, some glowing bright, others dim. Lines linked them like trade routes. "This is the region of space containing Red Horizon," he said. "But most settlers only know about their own system. The corporation likes it that way. As long as people think they're alone, they remain easy to control." Rhea stood beside him, staring at the floating stars. She had never seen anything like this before. In the colony school, the children were shown basic star charts, 5 or 6 systems that belonged to the corporation's mining network. Nothing like this. Nothing that showed so many worlds. "You came from one of these places?" she whispered. "Yes," Jackson answered. "Several of them. And I spent years working with a council made up of humans and other species. We were supposed to protect frontier colonies from falling under corrupt influence. But the corporations grew stronger. They started covering their tracks. People who spoke up disappeared. The council's authority weakened." Rhea felt her stomach tighten. "Does that mean what is happening here has happened before?" "In many places," Jackson said. "And most colonies never learn the truth." Rhea placed her hand against the edge of the holographic table. Her thoughts raced. She remembered the data logs she found. The numbers showed stolen resources. Work shifts kept longer than regulations allowed. Oxygen limits tightened. All of it hidden in system code. "They're going to keep doing it," she said, voice shaking slightly. "And now, they think I'm a threat." Jackson nodded. "That's the problem. On the frontier, people who know too much don't stay free long." A sudden fear hit her. "Will they come? Tonight?" He did not lie. "They might, but they'll have a harder time finding this place. And if they do, I'm prepared." Rhea didn't know if that comforted her or terrified her more. She had seen the speed with which he disabled the guard's armor. She believed he could protect himself. But this wasn't just a fight about one girl. This was a fight about an entire colony, an entire system, and she had never expected to be part of anything like that. Jackson returned to the kitchen and began preparing a simple meal. Rhea walked slowly around the cabin, taking in every sight. The wooden surfaces were polished but worn, as though touched often. There were books, real printed books, shelved beside a high-tech scanning terminal. A simple woven rug covered the metal floor plating. It was a strange blend of warmth and hidden power, like a sanctuary in the middle of nowhere. "You really could stay anywhere in the galaxy?" she asked as he placed food on the table. "Yes," he said. "But someone has to stand where others can't." Rhea sat down, eating slowly. The food was plain but good, and she hadn't realized how hungry she was until the first bite reached her tongue. She looked across at him. "What happens now?" Jackson set down his fork and folded his hands together. "Now we wait to see what the corporation does. They can't let what happened earlier go unanswered. But we'll be ready." Rhea looked around the cabin once more. She still felt the fear deep in her chest. But now another feeling mixed with it, hope. She wasn't alone anymore. And if Jackson was right, she was part of something much bigger than one colony's mining logs. Outside, the wind blew across the mountains, and the twin suns dropped behind the red peaks. Night settled, and the cabin lights glowed softly in the hidden shelter. Rhea knew danger was coming, but for the first time since her arrest, she felt safe enough to breathe. She sat back, letting her exhausted muscles relax. Whatever tomorrow brought, she would face it, and she would not be silent. Rhea woke slowly the next morning, blinking against soft cabin lights that adjusted to natural day brightness. For a moment she forgot where she was. She had spent the past night in a real bed with soft blankets. Not the thin pad in her small colony home, or the cold holding cell she had feared. She lay still, listening to the quiet hum of machinery hidden behind the walls. The cabin felt peaceful, like the world outside could not touch her. But then her memories returned, being accused, tied in the courtyard, the officer lifting the baton, and Jackson appearing like someone out of an old frontier story. She sat up quickly, heart racing again. She stood and moved into the main room. Jackson was already awake, sitting at the holographic map table, typing silently on a floating console. He looked calm, as if nothing about yesterday troubled him. She almost envied that. "Good morning," he said without turning. Rhea was surprised he already knew she was there. "How did you hear me?" Jackson smiled faintly. "This cabin listens to everything. The world is loud if you know how to hear it." She didn't know if he was joking or serious. She slid into a chair near the table and looked at the floating star map again. There were hundreds of tiny points of light blinking softly. "So that's the galaxy you told me about?" she asked. He nodded. "A piece of it?" "Yes." Rhea folded her arms on the table and leaned forward. "I want to know everything. I want to know who is doing this to the colonies. And I want to know who you really are. Rhea. I want to know who you really are." Jackson didn't answer immediately. Instead, he changed the star map display to show a cluster of systems, connected by dotted travel lines. "Before I ended up here," he began slowly, "I was part of something larger. A team. An alliance. Humans and other species worked together to keep frontier worlds safe. It wasn't perfect, but it gave people hope." Rhea considered this carefully. She had grown up believing humans were alone in space besides a few contacts. Advanced alien societies were things mentioned quietly in news reports. But the colony schools never talked about them. It suddenly felt like everything she'd been taught had been filtered for convenience. "Why did you leave that alliance?" she asked. Jackson's expression changed. Not anger, more like someone remembering something painful. "Because I saw what corporations were doing," he answered. "They were supposed to follow rules, share power, and be transparent. Instead, they started hiding profits, cutting corners, and using frontier settlers like replaceable tools. Some planets became places where laws didn't matter anymore. Rhea felt a lump in her throat. Like Red Horizon. Exactly, Jackson said softly. I tried to report it. But the council I served, they were overworked, politically divided, and often afraid of causing interstellar conflict. They told me to stand down and let the situation develop. I couldn't. So you left? Rhea asked. I resigned, he confirmed. And I came to the frontier to help however I could. Quietly. No titles. No orders. Just one person, keeping watch. Rhea rested her chin on her hands. So all this time, one man has been standing against whole corporations? Jackson shook his head. Not alone. There are others out there. Not many, but enough to make trouble. Rhea sat back and took a deep breath. She couldn't imagine the scale of what he was describing. She had thought the colony was the whole world. But it was only one tiny part of a much bigger puzzle. Jackson switched the screen again, pulling up a detailed image of the colony and its mining system. Boxes of text and numbers scrolled beside it. Data captured from signals he had been listening to overnight. You should see this, he said. Rhea leaned forward. She recognized the numbers immediately: output totals, credit transfers, supply allocations. The corporation was still siphoning profit and hiding losses. But this time, the evidence was massive, not just the small portion she had accessed. You hacked their system? She asked with wide eyes. Jackson gave a small shrug. I simply read the signals they thought were scrambled. Corporations forget that old encryption can't stop someone who has seen better. Rhea touched the edge of the projected data with her finger. You could expose them. All of this could prove what they are doing. I could. Jackson agreed. But exposing them isn't the hard part. Making sure the truth survives long enough to matter is. Rhea's heart sank. She knew exactly what he meant. If the corporation shut down communications, deleted evidence, or sent armed teams, no one off-world would ever learn the truth. The colony would stay quiet and controlled. She whispered, There must be a way. Jackson stood and walked to the kitchen area, returning with 2 cups of warm drink. Rhea took hers and let the steam warm her hands. There is a way, he said finally. But it requires risk. Not just for me. For you too. Rhea sat straighter. I'm already at risk. I can't go back to normal life. He nodded. Then, you deserve to understand what we're against. He returned to the star chart and changed the display. The map zoomed out until the cluster of systems became small dots in a much larger region. Some dots were highlighted in red. These are places where corporations have full control, he explained. No real government oversight. No independent courts. People live by the decisions of business executives, not elected representatives. Colonies. There are more like assets than communities. Rhea's throat tightened. How did it get this bad? With time, Jackson answered. At first, colonies begged for investment. Corporations built life support systems, ships, and infrastructure. But then they started charging more, demanding more, and rewriting contracts. And most settlers couldn't afford to fight, so they stayed quiet. Rhea stared at the red dots on the map. And now they're stealing resources openly. In some places, Jackson said, they are doing much worse. Rhea's fingers curled on the table. She suddenly understood something she hadn't realized before. She had been angry that the corporation tried to punish her for discovering the truth. But the truth was much larger. The colony was not an exception, it was part of a system. Jackson looked at her thoughtfully. You're frightened. Yes, she admitted honestly. But I'm more angry. That's good, he said with a small smile. Fear keeps you aware. Anger gives you purpose. Together, they can make people stand when the odds say they should fall. Rhea put down her empty cup. Her hands no longer trembled. In the colony courtyard yesterday, she said, I felt alone. Like everything I believed in could be taken from me, and no one would care. But now, I think there might be something worth fighting for. Jackson nodded once, quietly. Rhea looked around the cabin again. The disguised wooden walls, the hidden technology, the peaceful atmosphere, all of it felt like a symbol. A place that refused to follow the rules set by small-minded people with too much power. So what do we do next? She asked. We prepare, Jackson said. Because the corporation will not ignore what happened yesterday. Already, they know you escaped. They know a stranger interfered. And they will come looking. Rhea swallowed hard. How soon? Jackson tapped the console again, bringing up a new image. Surveillance readings flowed down the display. Ship movement logs, radio scans, encrypted messages. Soon, he answered. A transport left the settlement at dawn. Armed, searching. Rhea exhaled slowly. There was no going back. The peaceful morning she woke to was only a calm before something much larger. She stood up beside Jackson. Then teach me. Tell me what I need to know. R. Jackson looked at her, his expression steady and approving. All right, he said. But once you learn, everything changes. Rhea nodded. It already has. Outside, the alien wind swept across the mountains, carrying dust and the first hints of tension in the air. Deep inside the hidden cabin, two people looked at the map of a galaxy and knew the quiet part of the story was ending. What came next would not be simple, but it would be theirs to define. The air inside the cabin felt different as the day wore on. The peaceful silence from the night before had faded into a tense quiet, like the moment before a storm breaks. Rhea stood beside the big map table with her arms crossed, watching Jackson lay out small devices on a metal workbench. Each piece looked smooth, compact, and advanced far beyond anything she had ever seen outside a government tour broadcast. Jackson worked with steady hands. He did not seem nervous, but Rhea could feel something like pressure in the room. It was the pressure of time running out. She turned toward the star map again. Red horizon blinked as a small dot among countless systems. It was strange to think the fate of this little colony mattered to something so large. And yet, it did. How soon will they find us? She finally asked. Jackson didn't stop working. They will send scout drones before armed teams. The drones may arrive within the next few hours. Rhea felt her stomach twist. And when the armed teams come, Jackson looked up. We make their visit expensive and loud. She didn't fully understand what he meant, but she nodded anyway. She had chosen to stay. She had chosen to fight. That meant she could not back away now. Jackson handed her a small round object the size of a coin. Take this. Rhea rolled it between her fingers. What is it? A signal node, he explained. It links to my defensive grid. If you place enough of these around the cabin perimeter, anyone approaching without clearance will trigger alerts. Rhea's eyes widened. You want me to go outside? He gave a small smile. If you are going to help protect your homeworld, you should start with the ground beneath your feet. There, ward. And she hesitated only a moment. Then she nodded firmly. Jackson pressed a button on a small pouch, and more nodes appeared inside. Rhea strapped it across her shoulder and approached the cloaked exit. When the door shimmered open, the wind rushed in with a dry whisper. Outside, the mountains stretched upward like giant crimson teeth. The twin suns were hidden behind clouds of dust, giving the whole world a muted glow. Just hours ago, she had been a terrified prisoner. Now she was part of something she barely understood. She walked carefully along the rocks, setting one node at a time. The devices were simple to activate, she only had to place them against a surface and press lightly. A soft blink showed they were armed. She worked her way around the edge of the hidden entrance, thinking about how strange life had become. A day ago she thought the corporation had simply punished her for speaking up. Now she understood they were part of a bigger system of exploitation, powerful enough to silence whole planets. She swallowed her anger and kept working. Inside, Jackson monitored her progress on a wrist screen. He watched tiny dots appear on a topographic view of the mountains. She was learning fast. That gave him hope. When she returned, dust streaked across her boots. He nodded approvingly. Good work. That gives us a small defensive net. Rhea removed the pouch and wiped her forehead. What now? Jackson gestures toward the holographic map. Now, we find a way to send your evidence to the rest of the system. Rhea moved closer. I tried that once from the colony. It didn't work. Because the corporation controls the uplink towers, he said. They monitor every outgoing packet. Rhea frowned. So how do we get around them? Jackson tapped the map. The display zoomed out until the system of Red Horizon appeared in the corner, showing space traffic lanes and satellite networks. There is an old relay satellite above the far side of the planet, he explained. It was built before the corporation took control. They don't use it because it's outdated, but it still connects to independent channels. Rhea stared at the map. So we bypass their tower and send the data there? Jackson nodded. If we can patch into it, your records won't just go to government servers. They will go everywhere. Colonies, trade fleets, news channels. People far away will know what is happening here. Rhea felt something warm in her chest. Her eyes sharpened. Then we have to reach it. We don't have to leave the ground, he corrected. We can bounce the transmission if we build a strong enough signal booster. Rhea blinked. Can we? I can, Jackson said. But I need a second set of hands. She stepped forward without hesitation. Tell me what to do. Over the next hour, they worked side by side at the long workbench. Jackson showed her how to connect small crystalline power cells to a flexible transmitter plate. The circuitry looked like art, thin glowing lines woven like threads under glass. Rhea had only ever worked with clunky corporate mining systems. You learned all this from the Alliance? She asked quietly. Some of it, Jackson answered. Some I learned the hard way. She wanted to ask what that meant, but she sensed that he wouldn't tell her, at least not yet. They finished connecting the final stabilizer component when Jackson's wrist alarm buzzed sharply. He immediately crossed to the map table, and Rhea followed quickly. The map flickered and then showed a single moving dot approaching the mountains. Rhea's heart sped up. Is that a drone? Jackson zoomed in. Yes, one scout unit, small, but equipped with sensors. He typed something on the control panel. Outside, Rhea heard a faint hum through the wall. The cabin's exterior systems activated. The drone will sweep the area, Jackson said. If it sees anything unusual, they will send soldiers next. Rhea bit her lip. Can we stop it? We don't need to destroy it, he said calmly. We just have to convince it nothing is here. He tapped another console. Somewhere outside, the cloak field brightened. The cabin vanished deeper into its projection. The drone approached and hovered above the cliff. Rhea stood frozen, watching the map icon flash as the drone scanned. It felt like holding her breath under deep water. She expected alarms to go off, shouting voices, weapons firing. But after 10 seconds, the drone slowly drifted away. It's leaving, she whispered. It didn't see us, Jackson said. But now they know where to search. Rhea understood immediately. They're narrowing the grid. Jackson nodded with steady eyes. Which means the next visitors won't be mechanical. Rhea forced herself to stay calm. How long? Maybe an hour? Maybe 2. He turned to the half-finished transmitter. We need to finish this before they arrive. They worked faster, checking connections, sealing panels, running diagnostics. Ria's fingers shook once or twice, but she kept going. She was no longer just a frightened colonist. She had something to fight for now. As they worked, Jackson spoke without looking up. Once we send the message, they will know someone inside the colony helped. You mean me? Yes. Ria paused. I know. Jackson looked at her, measuring her resolve. He gave one small nod and returned to the devices. When the final stabilizer clicked into place, Ria almost sagged with relief. The booster shimmered softly, alive with power. We're almost there, Jackson said. But time was already running out. The mountain sensors flashed on the map. Ria's breath stopped. Several life signals appeared armed, armored, and approaching. Jackson tapped the controls. They're coming. Ria stood at his side. Fear pulsed in her chest. But she did not step away. This moment wasn't just survival. It was a chance to change everything, and she was ready to face it. The night sky over the Red Horizon Mountains seemed calm and peaceful. But inside Jackson's cabin, there was no peace. Every screen, sensor, and hidden device showed movement. The corporation's security forces were closing in. Ria stood beside the communication console, watching the red markers gather on the map. She could hear her own heartbeat in the quiet room. Jackson moved with calm focus, checking weapons, adjusting drone controls, and preparing defenses. But even with all his experience, Ria could see the tension in his eyes. He knew what was coming. He knew they had only one chance to win. If the message did not reach the outer systems in time, the corporation could silence them forever. Ria tried to stay calm. She reminded herself that they had chosen this. They were fighting back. She thought of the miners, the farmers, and the families back in the colony town. None of them knew how close they had come to losing everything. If she could send the evidence, the truth would no longer be buried under fear. Jackson looked over at her and gave a small nod. It was a simple gesture, but it gave her strength. She knew he believed in her. Outside, the wind howled across the metal rooftops and trees shook in the cold night. But the sound that truly mattered was different. Engines. Dozens of them. The security units had arrived. Jackson motioned Ria to take position at the control chair. She sat down and began typing, setting the data packet to upload. It was a heavy file with video logs, recorded testimonies, accounting records, and her own report explaining the corruption. But because of the satellite jamming systems the corporation used, she needed to route the signal through hidden uplink nodes that were not supposed to even exist. Jackson had shown her how to access them, but it would take time. And time was the one thing they might not have. A warning alarm went off. The outer motion sensors had triggered. Jackson tapped several keys and activated automated defense drones. Ria heard mechanical wings unfold outside, followed by the soft humming of power cells. Jackson grabbed his advanced rifle and stood near the window, scanning the terrain with machine-assisted vision. He spoke in a calm voice. Even though danger was seconds away, he told Ria that no matter what happened, she must finish the upload. She wanted to argue, but she saw the seriousness in his expression. She knew he meant it. Then the attack began. Bright blue stun rounds exploded against the force shields Jackson had set around the cabin. The ground shook as armored vehicles moved into firing positions. Drones in the air circled and fired at trained angles, trying to weaken the defensive grid. Jackson responded with precise shots, hitting the corporation drones one by one, not with the intention to kill, but to disable and slow the assault. He never enjoyed the violence, but he knew that sometimes protecting others required strength. Inside, Ria typed faster. The progress bar on her screen moved slowly. She whispered encouragement to herself, even though no one could hear. She imagined every colonist who had suffered in silence. She imagined the look of shock the corporate leaders would have when their lies were exposed to the entire system. The thought gave her renewed energy. A second wave of attacks hit the cabin. The shields flickered. Jackson adjusted power levels and reinforced the generator. Rhea saw him glance toward the window, his expression calculating. He was not scared. He was planning. He told her that if the shields dropped, she should go through the back tunnel and escape with the data core. She refused. She was not leaving him behind, not after everything he had risked to save her. He smiled slightly, but did not argue. He respected her choice. Outside, something large moved in the darkness. An armored mech suit, towering over the cabin, aimed its weapon arm at the roof. Jackson cursed softly and moved to a different position. He fired a small EMP launcher, and the mech system sparked, locking its joints and forcing it to fall sideways. The explosion of metal and dirt shook the entire mountain slope. For a moment, silence returned. Then a loud, echoing boom told them a breaching charge had been set against the front door. Jackson yelled for Rhea to stay low. She ducked under the console as the door burst open, showering debris across the room. Smoke filled the air. Heavy footsteps followed. Armored troops entered the cabin, shouting orders. Jackson responded with controlled blasts, forcing them back out before they could reach Rhea. The shields around the inner rooms flickered but held strong. The cabin's advanced systems gave them a chance, but it was clear the corporation did not plan to retreat. Rhea ignored the noise of the battle. She kept typing. The progress bar reached 90%. She told herself it had to finish. She was almost there. Another blast rocked the building, throwing her forward. She hit the floor, but quickly pushed herself up. Jackson shouted her name, making sure she was safe. She yelled back that she was fine and kept working. Outside, the corporation forces regrouped. They deployed sonic weapons, trying to overload the shield harmonics. Jackson saw the readings spike and knew they were seconds from collapse. He moved closer to the main generator and prepared to redirect emergency power. The cabin shook so violently that some equipment fell to the ground. But in that chaos, the sound Rhea had been waiting for finally came. A soft chime, simple and beautiful. The upload was successful. She stood, tears filling her eyes. The truth was now out. Every colony, fleet commander, and government council in range would see the evidence. The corporation's crimes could not be hidden anymore. She looked toward Jackson, who gave a small smile. He told her she had done it. She had won. The cabin shields finally broke. Troops rushed inside, weapons raised. But before they could fire, a new sound cut through the night air. A different engine, low and powerful, approached from the sky. Searchlights swept the ground. A voice amplified through loudspeakers announced that government peacekeepers had arrived. The corporation forces froze. Orders came from their own communication channels, telling them to stand down immediately. The battle was over. Minutes later, armored transports landed, carrying officials and investigators. The corporation's commanders were escorted away in restraints. Rhea and Jackson stepped outside together, watching the soldiers secure the area. A government representative approached, thanking them for their bravery. He told Jackson that the council requested he return to his role as envoy, now that his warnings had proven true. But Jackson shook his head. He said he would serve better among the people, not behind a desk. Rhea was offered protection, a reward, even relocation to a safer system. But she also refused. She wanted to stay on Red Horizon. She had grown stronger. She had found purpose. She had learned that ordinary people could change the course of human destiny. She wanted to help Jackson continue his mission, protecting the frontier and making sure humanity did not repeat the mistakes of the past. As dawn lit the mountains, they looked toward the horizon together. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, they felt hopeful. Humanity had proved once again that when people stood together, no empire, corporation, or injustice could silence them. They walked back to the damaged cabin, ready to rebuild. Their fight was not over. But now they had shown the galaxy what humans could be at their best. They had shown what courage, truth, and unity could achieve.